Hi, welcome back. Now we're going to look at some of the complications that occur when we're using interrupts. They're not our response to everything, but they can be a fantastic response to some of the problems we face as embedded systems engineers if we use them wisely. And that means understanding some of the limitations and complications of them. And the first thing I want to do is just cover again what an interrupt does. So we've got our normal code processing. When we get our interrupt, we enter into the interrupt service routine and we carry out the code in that routine, and then we go on to do our normal code processing again. Okay, so in this situation, I'm going to look at the fact that maybe this interrupt service routine is taking relatively quite a long period of time. Let's have a look at what happens. Our interrupt occurs, our pin goes low, this triggers our code operates, and then during that time, the pin might go high again, and then might go low again. At this point, the interrupt will not be triggered. Now, there's a reason for that, is that because these interrupts on the AVRs are not re-entrant. That means that you cannot re-enter the code while it is running. It blocks that interrupt from occurring. In fact, it blocks, I'm pretty sure, I wouldn't quote this, but without looking at the data sheet, but I'm pretty sure all physical interrupt pins are blocked during this period of time, okay? So what happens now is that if this interrupt occurs, the second interrupt change occurs during the ISR, it won't be detected. You will have missed it. Okay, now this can be a bit of a complication if this is a timing or a very sort of critical, mission critical event for our code, for it to miss an interrupt. It's just not good enough. And so you need to know that an ISR shouldn't be too long. But what does too long mean? Well, it always comes down to the situation and the problem you're trying to resolve. And really, it must be no longer than the time between events in the real world. So this is what we're looking for. Let me just highlight that. No, it's not going to. A lot of delays while it's recording and doing other things. My PC, there we go. So your interrupts must be no longer than the time between events in the real world. And really, the golden rule and the rule of, I'll say the golden rule. The golden rule is don't call functions within an interrupt, within an ISR. Okay, an interrupt service routine. Don't call functions within an ISR. That's not a blanket rule, but actually if you stick to that and you keep all your processing short, then you're less likely to run into this sort of problem. Okay, so that's the first sort of complication of you've got to understand. The other thing you need to understand is that when you connect a mechanical switch to a pin, of course you get contact bounce, which means that the voltage on the pin bounces up and down between 0 and VCC, or between 1 and 0 logic values, multiple times before it settles, okay? And we've already discussed this. Now that takes a certain period of time. It could be, for a really poor quality switch, it could be 50 milliseconds. For a high quality switch, it might not be many bounces, if any. So you have to be aware of the switch you're using. And let's just have a look at the complication that arises when you've got some, just a short interrupt service routine. So this first interrupt happens here when the switch first closes, and then the interrupt service routine begins to operate. Well, during that time, the switch has bounced once. These contacts have bounced once and are closed again. But of course, because of the fact that the ISR is not re-entrant, it will not detect this second bounce. Now the ISR finishes, we go back to our normal code processing, and then there's another bounce here. So this bounce is actually followed by a second bounce. And these two bounces, well, the first one causes the interrupt service routine to be called again. The second one is ignored, again, because it's not re-entrant. And then it finishes and goes back to normal processing. And then finally, after a number of bounces of the switch closes and the ISR is triggered a third time. So what we've done is we've got one input on our ISR. Sorry, we've got one input on our input interrupt pin like INT0 or INT1, and yet it's been triggered an interrupt 3 times. Now, this could be multiple times. It could be once. The thing to be wary of, though, about mechanical switches is that their performance can vary depending on the way the switch is pressed sometimes, how hard the switch is pressed, the durability of the switch, so it might wear out over time, meaning that it actually bounces more or less over time. So these are things that are really unknown that you've got to account for when you're working with these sort of things. The golden rule is really keep your interrupt service routine as short as possible. But the real issue is trying to avoid mechanical switches on interrupt pins. Of course, you can't always do that. Sometimes you just have to put mechanical type switches on interrupt pins. And what that means for you is that you might have to find another way of solving the problem. Now, of course, you've already got a few other tricks up your sleeve at the moment, and one of those is a timer. So what you could do is, during this first call of the interrupt service routine, you could call a timer, and then the timer times out after, say, 30 milliseconds, and at that point in time, the actual ISR code that you want is run as part of the timer interrupt service routine instead of as part of the INT interrupt service routine. So that's one of the sort of things you can do to solve this sort of problem, and you can just become quite creative. So the idea is to understand how to be creative with something like this. You have to understand the problem, and you have to understand the problem from the point of view of the embedded system. And then you have to understand the features and capabilities of your embedded system and its limitations. This is really important. And then once you've got this sort of toolbox of kit of solutions and ideas, then you can start playing with them to see what's going to work best for you, and then trial and test it, okay? Typical sort of problem solving approach in many different areas of life. Understand the problem thoroughly, understand your toolbox of tools and procedures thoroughly, and then putting the two together to try and work on a solution, hypothesizing about it, and then trialing it to see if it actually works. But being very aware, of course, that there are things in the real world that change that you might not be able to anticipate. Okay. Now, another issue is that if you get an interrupt which occurs reasonably regularly, then your normal code processing might not happen as much as it needs to. Let's have a look here. So what we've got is we've got an interrupt which is happening here, and then happens again here, here, and here. Okay, now it looks like it's a regular time, but imagine that they're just slightly different timings. Now, here's your normal code processing, and then you get the interrupt. Now, interrupt service routine runs, goes back to the normal code, and then it hasn't had much time to run, and then there's another interrupt, and so the ISR code runs again, and then your code goes back to its normal mode of operation, but then another interrupt occurs. Okay, now this is like, you know, imagine sitting here recording a video lecture, and every 2 minutes someone knocks on the door and tries to come in. Okay, you never get your video lecture prepared, okay, because you're getting interrupted too long. So the idea is, how do we work around this sort of problem? Well, again, it's a design issue for you, understanding how this can happen, and then hypothesizing about what could go wrong, and designing your solution so that it works best, and then testing it thoroughly. Okay, so I'm just going to stop this little section before we go into the next bit and start talking about variables. Cheers.